want to really acknowledge the work of the Pilbara Regional Chamber of Commerce, bringing this event together and deciding that you are going to work collaboratively across the Pilbara to sell your very, very special story. It is always difficult where you've got a variety of different communities thinking about focusing on your particular community and seeing perhaps the one down the road as the rival, whereas we really do know now and understand that particularly in a place like the Pilbara, you get so much more through collaboration and joining together, as I say, to sell this very special story. So just congratulations to the regional chambers, fantastic. Can I thank you, Matthew, for a very Mordich Wajak, welcome to Wajak Buja. Always really enjoy the Maguire family. Absolutely keep those traditions alive fantastically. And can I welcome my very special good friend, Kevin Michelle, the member for the Pilbara. Kevin and I had an extraordinary time during the election, as I say, doing our Thelma and Louise across the region, and really enjoying getting on top of all of the issues. Want a special acknowledgement too to Melissa Price, federal member. We've got to be very, very nice to Melissa because we do want to get a reasonable share of that money that is set down for Northern Australia, and we want to work in close collaboration to make sure that WA, at least in that area, if not now GST, maybe gets a fair crack at the Northern Australian bucks that are up for grabs. Also acknowledge Mia Davies, Jackie Bordell, I believe Senator Linda Reynolds is down here, and I did see Brendan Grills. Brendan, welcome. And of course to all of the consulate corps that are here in force, fantastic, because the Pilbara obviously is so deeply linked with Asia and indeed many investors from around the world. Now, I was just thinking, I'm supposed to be doing this myself now. Got to do my little pictures, okay. But, sorry, it should be the other way around. But I was just the other night reading the book, Red Dog book, which I did pick up from the Karratha Visitor Centre. And it really just reminded me, brought into focus, just, how much change has gone on. Reading about those days in the 70s, I can't imagine Red Dog with today's stringent OC health and safety would have been loud on the mine sites as he was in those days. And going back even a little, further to 1960, before the iron ore bans were lifted by the federal government. I mean, extraordinary to think there was barely a sealed road north of Geraldton, and now we have this extraordinary development around Newman, Karratha, Tom Price, Paraburdoo, Panawanika. Towns that just simply in those days did not exist. And of course we now know that the Pilbara is the economic powerhouse of this nation, producing 98% of Australia's iron ore, more than 50% of our LNG, and that's worth collectively around $60 billion in 2016. And of course, on the Burrup Peninsula, we have the world's largest outdoor art gallery with more than 1 million petroglyphs dating back more than 50,000 years. It has the world's largest bulk export-import headland, and I always remember that Marble Bar is the hottest place in Australia. So we know that the the Pilbara its economy is cyclical, and that there have been from the very first, there have been upswings and downturns. And Kevin and I, as we travelled through at the last election, we really saw the repercussions of the latest collapse in the finishing of the mining construction boom. And we saw the problems emerging of negative equity and very great difficulty in many of the existing businesses actually struggling to support them, struggling with the massive drop-off in demand in their communities. But of course the trick is to get the critical mass. There will always be those commodity cycles, but what we've got to get is an underpinning of a stable, sustainable base and a degree of diversification that is going to be able to see this community survive and to moderate those swings and ensure that it is not just that whilst there will be cycles, that these cycles won't be boom and bust. And so as Kitty said, there is fantastic opportunities now. Now that, we don't have the mining companies, standing at the airports, ripping all the teachers out, sort of offering them, mega dollars to come and work for them. We're not having to fly in, fly out school cleaners. Ministers don't have to go and stay in the caravan park or accept the very generous hospitality of Jan Ford in her house. That we've now got the possibility. We've now got prices have come back into the realms of normality. We've now got that capacity to really start driving these other industries. So it's been painful for many people, but with that comes this very real upside, this very real opportunity to build those industries. And I just want to talk about some of the opportunities because there is opportunities with Aboriginal employment, because I wouldn't have wanted from my earlier slides, I've forgotten to be, sorry, I haven't been doing my flicking. I wouldn't want to suggest that before the 1960s there's nothing in the Pilbara. I mean, we know we had a pastoral industry that had itself experienced very ups and downs, but we know that before that there was already a 50,000-year-old culture in play in the Pilbara, and we would not ever want to estimate how fascinating that is to the communities around the world. And in particular, given that we have got, as we talked about before, these extraordinary petroglyphs and that are readily accessible to a tourist community. I mean, of course, these things have a far greater value than just tourism artefacts, but their ability to provide this linkage with the Indigenous community and provide economic opportunity for Indigenous communities can't be underestimated. And I have to say, I went with Clinton Walker, and I think it was Vincent Adams, one Nylama, one Yinjibandi man. We went on one of these rock tours a couple of Saturdays ago, and it was extraordinary. And what was the most extraordinary thing was the sense of linkage it gave you, because you were with them, the sense of linkage it gave you to what was happening there just demonstrates to me just what a powerful economic opportunity this would be to really cultivate this beautiful culture and allow people from around the world to experience it in this very extraordinary way. And of course, went out on Consink Bay and had a look at with the Murajuga Ranges. Great tourism potential there. This has got to be one of the big drivers for the economy, because we all know that unless we ensure that the Indigenous community is woven into the economic life of the Pilbara, that we are not going to make the changes, the necessary changes. We're not going to achieve the fulfilment that we need today. And of course, the absolute physical beauty of the place gives us broad tourism opportunities, and on Paul Papalia has our tourism minister working with the Pilbara Development Commission and other agencies has developed as calling for expressions of interest for the development of an eco-accommodation in the Millstream Chichester National Park. The state government, we're calling for submissions from investors that are wanting to, are prepared to invest in accommodation. We're really looking around, our preferred site is around the Palm Pool, an extraordinary piece of combination of nature and human history. And those submissions will close on the 27th of September. So I really encourage people to have a look at that as an option, as tourism really is going to be a big driver in the Pilbara. What is on offer there is so extraordinary. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about iron ore, because iron ore's always been the story, but gas is really and part of this extraordinary, very much part of the extraordinary story of the Pilbara. We know that Woodside is pursuing a whole raft of development opportunities that are really going to keep Karratha and the wider Pilbara pumping for decades to come. We have the multi-billion-dollar investment in the Karratha gas plant life extension project that's going to be keeping that plant up to date and modern beyond 2040 to really keep that Burrup hub competitive and Karratha prosperous. At the same time, we are very optimistic that Browse will eventually be developed through Karratha. And later on this morning, I believe that Woodside's Vice President will be telling us more about the development opportunities for of LNG as a low-emission transport fuel, and how the Pilbara is positioned to be at the forefront of that emerging innovation. We're also in very active discussions with a number of petrochemical companies about gas downstreaming opportunities on the Burrup, taking advantage, as Yarra currently does, with its fertiliser plant, of the proximity to gas production. And I'm sure this time next year we will have at least two of those projects that are advanced. We're also very excited by the work that Yarra is doing, wanting to develop a pilot plant now to use gas to extract hydrogen for the Japanese and Korean automotive fuel markets. We think this is very fantastic development. And of course, it leads us to talk about the renewables, which of course, one of the great big advantages of the Pilbara is that sun, and that the Pilbara has one of the highest levels of direct solar radiance in the world, and that is really providing us with unique opportunities to harness power from the sun to sell that around the world. And Yarra, as many of you will know, are looking after their next stage of their project after the pilot using gas to develop hydrogen is to look at solar energy to produce this hydrogen for export. And as almost a consequential product of that is the Sahara Forest project that was announced at last year's conference, which is a planned 10 megawatt renewable hydrogen plant, would also, in the desalination of seawater, then be used to provide intensive horticultural opportunities in the Pilbara. And that Yarra project is working closely with the Pilbara Development Commission and the City of Karratha to develop that. And of course, some of you might have seen, I was going to announce today, but somehow or other got into the newspaper before, this new exciting opportunity emerging in the Pilbara to harness solar resources and to become a major exporter. And so I'm very pleased to announce today that we are able to formally release the findings of the pre-feasibility study into solar energy export from the Pilbara to Asia via a subsea cable. Now this is, I think some people have reacted that this is completely outlandish. But when you look at what is happening with around the world, with the linkages that have been worked on between Africa and Europe, where you see the development and the particular investment that has been made by the Chinese government to have an East Asia-wide grid, that you see this is a very, very positive and prospective project. So we see that given that our natural advantage of lots of land being available, this very high solar radiance, our very closeness to the Indonesian market, that we see that the potential for this 3 gigawatt solar export could create around 2,000 jobs in the Pilbara. And of course it is a high velocity HV, high velocity DC direct current cable to Indonesia. And I want to make it clear that we were working on this project, that the PDC in the commissioning of this project involved 2 Indonesian universities, and we're very pleased that that His Excellency Mr. Pak Ade, who the Indonesian Consul General, has indicated his support for the release of this project. He knows that there is a major energy shortage in Indonesia, and we hope that we can work together to ensure that we get a symbiotic relationship developing out of this. And one of the contributors to this report was Kylie Chalmers from Yamaji Malpa Aboriginal Corporation, and I note that the corporation today will be announcing a new solar venture, which is fantastic, and we hope that we will be able to drive these projects, bring these projects together. For any of these opportunities to advance, I mean, honestly, we have got to get on with fixing the grid in the Pilbara. I have to say I was extraordinarily disappointed that the last government, 3 weeks into its term, pulled the whole Pilbara integrated power solution, the idea of bringing all of the power stations into a grid. That this particular project, which was the #1 rated project nationally by Infrastructure Australia, really has the potential to drive great efficiency, to drive down power costs in the Pilbara by up to 20%, which is great for the diversification of the industry. But also to provide the redundancy to enable really renewables to thrive and prosper. Now at the moment we've got over 2,000 megawatts of stored capacity in the Pilbara, and but currently a peak load of only 1.4 1,400 megawatts. So what we've got is a very costly and inefficient system, and there was a time where it would have been a bit tough to get the warlords, together on this. But I have to say that I sense a very real change in attitude. That there is an understanding that the community demands and needs a better response, so that we can in fact have a more efficient energy use and generation, driving down our costs, but then also creating space where we could, using this HVDC, really look at export opportunities of of electricity, even to our friends in the East Coast, which to prop up the national grid. And I'm very pleased that earlier this month, Energy Minister Ben Wyatt has announced that that they're going to design a fit-for-purpose regulatory framework and system operated for Pilbara Northwest interconnected system. So under Ben's watch, there will be an enormous amount of work that is going into seeing how that we can do this power generation in the Pilbara much better and really open up opportunities. Of course, Agricultural Minister, I need to talk a little bit about the agricultural opportunities. And can I here acknowledge Terry Hill for the work that he's doing as the CEO of the Pilbara Development Commission. Terry was a refugee from agriculture. And we're now hoping that, with his unique set of skills now in agriculture and regional development, that we will really be able to build our presence and activity in this space, because there's no doubt that with the demand for protein and high quality fresh produce, there is an enormous potential for growing this market, for getting our cattle industry much more productive, improving the genetics of the stock, ensuring that we're doing the R&D that gives us the best possible range of animals, and that we continue with the experimentation of fodder crops, and in fact engage in the pastoral land reform that needs to be put into a place where we can mainstream pivot irrigation on pastoral properties, which combined, as I say, with the R&D, improving pasture types, improving herd genetics, will see us really, I think, doubling the value of that output. And we've seen some extraordinary work going on with Bruce Cheng and with the forests at Minderoo and many others. So we're now seeing things like Wagyu beef growing in the Pilbara. So lots of work to be done, some pretty new exciting ones, and this is not associated with medicinal cannabis, but apparently the Hemp Corporation is proposing a commercial hemp industry in the Pilbara. And I remember being on a parliamentary committee about this about 20 years ago. Glad to see that it might be coming to fruition, because this as a feedstock for as sustainable feedstock for so many building products, furniture, food, paper. It's a fabulous product. And so hopefully we'll be the hemp capital of Australia in all the good ways. Kevin and I sort of gave a commitment during the last election that the Labor government would fix up this whole issue of spoil bank. Now there is some, obviously, debate in the community about exactly how one might go around doing that, and how you will deal with the very substantial dust issues that's still affecting Port Hedland. I'm pleased to say that we have got a couple of very good public consultation processes coming up over the next month, and I'm sure that in the next 2 years we will see some substantial change and beautification around that part of Port Hedland. Look, I want to also just quickly talk about the scale of the established and projected infrastructure projects in the northwest in the mining and gas industry, along with these new downstream processing projects that are being talked about, means that the northwest will effectively host a constant campaign of shutdown, maintenance, repair and refurbishment activity. And this means that we have really got the capability of having a permanent workforce that is undertaking a substantial part of this shutdown and maintenance work, and this has the opportunity really to drive well beyond the construction phase of projects a permanent workforce, that we're getting a scale now that you could house a workforce permanently dedicated to the shutdowns, maintenance and refurbishment. And one of our commitments during the last election, which was to the next stage of the Karratha Tom Price Road. You know, we did a couple of stages last time we were in government. We're getting on to the next one. We're talking to our very good friends in the mining industry about how we might do the final one. But that not only will that open up the tourism opportunities of the Tom Price Parapadu region, but it will, for the first time, if we complete that road, it will allow those very substantial mine sites in Tom Price and Parapadu to be serviced from Karratha. Great, again, we can't underestimate the role of this maintenance and shutdown campaigning can have to underpin our industry. Now, I am getting the wind up, so I'll just mention, you know, of course, we're very keen to progress the Onslow marine supply base. That project is well underway. Melissa, they're pretty keen on getting some Northern Australia money, and we hope that you'll will be able to support that. Mine rehabilitation and dust mitigation, massive opportunities, particularly, I think, for the Indigenous community growing seed nurseries and planting this out. We're not sure that we've really been doing this up to the standard needs to be, but that in itself is going to be a massive new industry opportunity. And Kitty, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to very quickly talk about local content and driving local jobs, because one of our commitments as government, we don't have a huge amount of money, as you know, at the moment, but one of our commitments is to make sure that every bit of infrastructure, every service provision that we deliver, we maximise the opportunity for local content. We have already started this with the appointment through each regional development commission, appointed an officer who would be the local content officer, who are being trained now to deliver, to make sure that local business understands, is aware of all the opportunities that are coming up, and that we facilitate their participation in that tender process, and will provide independent feedback to government about, across agencies, about the success of our businesses to be able to do that. And we've seen over the weekend the Premier announced a new legislation that's going to require the participation plans actually to be embedded as part of their as part of the contract. And we're very pleased to see companies that are now Rio and BHP, FMG, others really committing also to this local content provision. I just have to say, I think I tell everyone, go and invest in the Pilbara, take advantage of this opportunity, to drive this forward. And I just have one further. I want to thank Chris Gilmore, who has done a fantastic job as the Chair of the Pilbara Development Commission. Chris, thank you very much for your work. Chris is now retiring, and I can announce, very excited to announce, the replacement, who I believe is here, is Brendan Hammond. Brendan will be known to many of you for the work that he's done in energy and ports in the Pilbara, and I look forward for Brendan now helping us drive this new agenda, particularly in relation to energy. Thanks very much.
Please put your hands together.